I think Jesus loved me enough to absolutely wreck my life.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
just the truth of it.
Yeah.
And he loved me enough to keep my mom next to me, even though I was away from him. Like my mom, I think that there are a lot of women who don't see Jesus as enough. You come to Jesus so that you can get the other thing. I'm coming to Jesus now. Lord, can you help me find a husband? I'm coming to Jesus now. Can you help me raise perfect children? But what happens if the husband never comes? What happens if your children fall away from the faith? Does that mean that you are not a daughter? But you are. If you truly believe that you are his and that your identity is found in him, then you're allowed to rest in the unfinished work. You might never be married. You might never have children, and you are complete in him.
What up, though, family? Welcome to Dig In with Dr. Los. And on season 2 of Dig In with Dr. Los, we are digging into discipleship. And some of y'all might be like, discipleship? What does that word even mean? I hear it, church people say it. What does that mean? Hang with us and we're going to define it. But today we have a sister with me who I am honored to be sharing with as my co-host today. Man, she is one of my sisters in Christ. Man, this woman is multi-talented, multi-gifted, everything from discipleship, curriculum writing, being a theologian, seminary person, student who's growing in their knowledge and love of the word, all the way to being one of the most incredible worship leaders and vocalists you'll hear with a wonderful, soulful voice that blesses us weekly. So, man, she is a part of our Grow team. So here at Refresh Community Church, we have a team of men and women who write curriculum, review curriculum in our Grow ministries. And so she's actually written and authored curriculum that our small groups go through here at Refresh Community Church. She also is a discipler of women and leads incredibly in our church. She is one of our deacons here. She's one of our leaders. And like I said, one of our incredibly talented and gifted and anointed worship leaders. So I bring to you none other than the incomparable, the amazing Bernie Jamison. Welcome, Sister Bernie.
Hey, Dr. Los.
What's happening, Bernie? I'm so glad that you came hang out with me today. Yeah. So are you, as we sit and get ready to get into discipleship, are you ready to dig in?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, we gonna dig into discipleship. I'm ready to hear your profundities. Yes, profundity. Okay. That's right. That's a real word, right? Yeah, that's a real word. I'm just making sure, when you get a doctorate, they let you make up words.
Yeah, that's a word.
All right, cool. So discipleship, let's start there with this idea of discipleship. Like people hear it, we've been in church, people say it all the time. But sometimes I even think that people in church, like you can use a word so much that it almost like loses its meaning. Yeah. And so I guess my question is how would you, from your perspective as a person who writes, as a person who disciples others, have been discipled, how would you define that word discipleship?
Mm-hmm. I think at the base level, discipleship is the process of being a student. Mm-hmm. Being a student and sitting at someone's feet. It's an odd word because we don't use it anywhere else in culture.
No.
It feels very Christianese.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it is.
But yeah, I think it's just committing to being a student, and in the Christian context, it's committing to being a student of the teachings of Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, that's good. That's good. Being a student of Jesus, like when you think about that, like becoming a student of Jesus and sitting at his feet and learning and growing, like, are there any like pictures that come to mind? Like, are there like, how would you, are there particular, like, I don't know, like a picture, a modern picture in our culture that you would give, like, okay, discipleship is like this?
I think what comes to mind, it's really odd. So my first experience with discipleship was outside of the Christian context.
Okay.
It was actually, for a period in my life, I was in the Islamic faith.
Oh, okay.
And I encountered a Muslim family that truly took me into their world.
Can I ask what kind of Islam family? Like, was this?
Ahmadiyya Islam.
Okay.
And they're here in St. Louis.
Okay.
That community is here in St. Louis. But yes, Ahmadiyya Islam. And this family took me into their world. They took actually me and my child into their home. We would go there every day, eat dinner with them, pick up the kids with them. You know, if I needed a ride to work, they'd take me to work or they'd help babysit. They truly integrated me into their world. And I had to make myself available. And it's like, although the content was wrong, but the method was right.
I got you.
It took me a while to learn that, but that was I would say my first encounter with like discipleship. Yeah.
That's interesting. So, you know, when like you talked about like being a student of Jesus, and I'm sure when people hear the word student, probably the first imagery people think of somebody like in a classroom. Like,
no, yeah, not content.
Yeah. And but when you like talked about your experiences, like content was almost like on the back. I wouldn't say on the back end, but it was like you started talking about like, hey, they picking me up from work. They took me took in me and my child. Like they embraced me into the whole in the flow of their life, so that the study, if you will, the curriculum. I mean, yes, it was in that context Islam, but in terms of the experience of it, it was life on life. It was going with them in the stream of their life. Yeah. And
I think it was unique because it allowed them to speak into every aspect of my life because nothing was hidden. I gave them the whole me, so they were able to teach every part of my life.
What did I'm curious because I'm not familiar with Ahmadiyya Islam. I'm more familiar with from Detroit, so I spend a lot of time with Brothers in the Nation. I actually have some family members who have been in Sunni Islam and things like that. So I'm less familiar with this strand of Islam. But what are some of the things that you learned as you were discipled early in life through Islam and by this family?
I think one of the biggest things that I learned is if I truly want to be taught, I have to be really, really honest about where I'm at and what I need. One of the questions that they ask me that I find myself asking people who are seeking discipleship is, what are you looking for? And that was one of the questions that the woman that was discipling me asked me at the time. What am I looking for? And I had so many questions. But yeah, I find that bringing my whole self to the discipleship relationship was vital. Being honest about where I was and what I needed and what I was looking for was the starting point for me.
Wow, that's incredible. I'm curious because, now, we know that you're a Christian at this point. And we even talked how, I think previous to that, you said you were like kind of church adjacent a little bit. Yes. I'm curious, because, I have a lot of Muslim friends in life, and Islam is what can be. Some people talk about it as a thick tradition, in a sense that it encompasses the whole of your life. Like you pray 5 times a day, like what is it? It's called the Salat, I believe it is. Like 5 times a day, and the dietary laws, and things like that. So it encompasses by design so many aspects of your life. Oftentimes, when people are discipled and mentored and apprenticed in those types of traditions, it becomes difficult for them to come, out of those traditions and change because it becomes just so entrenched in every aspect of your life. So I'm kind of curious, how did you being discipled in Islam, and that being your first real experience, though being church adjacent, someone going about the path of life with you, what caused you to go from, okay, I am a Muslim to, okay, I'm no longer a Muslim and now I'm a Christian? How did the discipleship, were you re-discipled as a Christian? How did that transit? What happened? I'm curious about how that happened.
I think Jesus loved me enough to absolutely wreck my life.
Okay.
That's just the truth of it. He loved me enough to wreck my life. And I had a mama who didn't care nothing about what I was doing. She didn't admit nothing. I remember telling her, I think it was Christmas. And I was like, I got to go to my mama's house. It's Christmas. but I'm a Muslim. How do I navigate this? And I was like, Ma, I'm going to come up for Christmas. And I remember her yelling through the phone, in my house, we eat pork. I was like, what? Well, how do we get here? Like,
In my house, we eat pork.
Maybe that was her way of saying we serve Jesus. I don't know. But that's what she said.
The Lord knew. The Lord knew.
Yes. So I think the Lord loved me enough to wreck my life. And he loved me enough to keep my mom next to me, even though I was away from him. Like my mom, she loves the Lord. And her love for the Lord did not cause her to separate and kill our relationship just because I was not walking with him.
Powerful. Can you double click on that? Because I've heard many stories of people who, were Christians and they, for whatever reason, they walk away from the faith or they deconstruct, or, just they go down a path of life and they end up in a faith that they were not raised in, by their mom. And that, that sounds to be this case. But you said that she didn't leave, know. So could you speak to, how you experienced that, like the impact that had on you, just what was that like? Because I know people that got opposite stories. They're like, I deconstructed my faith and it ruined my relationship with my parents. Or, obviously we've all heard stories of people in the LGBTQIA community who are like, I came out and my parents disowned me or put me out the house and all these things. So can you speak to just that experience and the power of it in an impact in your life?
Yeah, I think for me, it taught me God's love in a special way. I think if we're not careful, we will believe that I only have access to God's love when I am doing what he wants me to do. And my mom loving me and being present with me, even though I was away from the faith, really became like this foundation of how my relationship with God was built. I know that I don't have to get it right for him to be right there next to me.
Wow.
And I also know that my mom was unapologetic. Like she stayed there next to me, but she didn't make room for the lies that I believed. She constantly told me the gospel. So for me, I think that's what I take with me. The Lord is next to me, even when I'm broken, even when I don't understand. He's with us, even when we don't get it.
I think it's profound, that you paint a picture. And I see your mom on Sundays. Shout out to Azrina. What's happening? It's my homie. But you paint this picture of she two things were true at once. Like she wasn't abiding the lies. She wasn't saying, "Oh yeah, everything is fine. We all it's all basically something." Like she wasn't doing that.
Never.
She like we gonna eat. I don't care what Farrakhan say. We eating bacon. But and at the same time, not abiding the lies or the error that's there. But I'm also not leaving my daughter. Right. And those two things can coexist.
Absolutely.
And in my experience, I've often, seen when these things often happen that I think from both perspectives, people have trouble holding those two things together. It's like, well, if I'm gonna stand for truth, well, I'm not gonna abide the lies and I'm gonna prove it by disowning this person. It's like, no, or is if you're going to be in relationship with me, then you have to accept everything that I'm saying or doing and believing, even if it grates against your conscience. And it sounded like in this case, your mom did a phenomenal job holding those two things together. That I'm both going to love my daughter and I'm not going to abandon her, but I'm also going to stand for truth and for the gospel. And that's beautiful. I had a similar experience. For me, I had got caught up in it was still a strand of Christianity, but it was just some heresy, some error, prosperity stuff. And some of the worst sort. It was just this really heavy into some of the more damaging forms of Christianity, the money and the some of the movements, the naming and claiming stuff. I had got really caught up in that type of stuff. The amazing thing about it is that I was broke. I don't know what I was doing.
It didn't work.
Not for me. Bishop had a Bentley. I was on in Detroit is the DOT, the part of the bus. Ooh. It's what it is. Yeah, I wasn't no he adamantly, but and man, I had got caught up in this stuff, and I had a good friend of mine who, even though I was kind of getting into some weird theology stuff, really weird stuff going on there, he just remained my friend, and he was at my old church where I had got baptized at. It was a regular schmegular missionary Baptist church, no bells, whistles, just good old, not a pastor could hoop and shut it down, but but it was just a regular Black Baptist church, and he just remained my friend, even though I was off into some weird stuff. And over time, as I began to see more clearly about, like I just kept reading my Bible and seeing some of the stuff not lining up. Man, my friend was right there to help disciple me out of error and back into truth. Yeah. And so relationship matters.
I think love and presence has a way of watering those seeds that were planted early on. So.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So I want to ask some questions because I've had conversations and have conversations with many men in our church, and I disciple men. I got a whole group of young men that I'm discipling, but I really today wanted to hear from your perspective and your experience as a woman. But I want to hear, what would you say as you think about specifically discipleship? We can talk about that broadly, like, okay, we want to be apprentices of Jesus and we want to be students of Jesus more broadly, but I really want to focus in on women. And I'm really curious, when you think about discipleship for women and this idea of what it means for a woman to be a student, or I'll use the language of apprentice, like someone who's patterning their life after Jesus, what things do you see? What particulars do you see as a woman and as a discipler of other women? What particular things that are maybe unique to a woman's experience of discipleship do you see that's maybe not addressed as much or as well as it needs to be in the church context?
I think one of the things that comes to mind is identity. I believe that a lot of women find their identity in, unfortunately, marriage or motherhood. And when you commit your life to Christ, your identity should be found in him. However, it's like and unfortunately, I think in a lot of ways, the church universal can also disciple women in this idea that you are as useful as you are a wife or a mother.
Wow.
And I think it's very unhealthy, and I think it's very unhealthy. So I would say identity. I would also say just learning to deeply study God's word and move from this surface level. Women have a tendency to get together and I'm dancing around saying certain things. Women have a tendency to get together and have lots of tea time and we never get to the nitty gritty of what's happening in the lives of women.
Don't dance around.
Women can be shallowly discipled under the guise of community and fellowship, but we're not actually learning what Jesus is calling us to. So
listen, y'all, this is why I have her on here, because there's so many things I've never heard. Like, you just said a few sentences and I just need to unpack all of them, because I don't think I've ever heard. Now, I'm a man, so I will just, throw that out there. But I've never heard in my life, and I've never preached in my life, a distinction between a woman finding her identity in Jesus versus finding it as a wife or a mother. Like, I don't know if I've even ever heard those things separated before. And again, it could be just maybe because I ain't reading the right books or whatever, but I'm just wondering, could you go deeper there and say more about it? Because to me, it's very fascinating, because it's not even, in fact, I'm beginning. I'm like, oh my God, have I conflated these things myself in the pulpit? You probably like, yeah, you have. But like, I've never thought about it, and I would that you just kind of flesh that out a little more, and then talk about what impact that has on women that experience the conflation of those things through discipleship. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that there are a lot of women who don't see Jesus as enough. So when you don't see him as enough, you come to Jesus so that you can get the other thing. I'm coming to Jesus now. Lord, can you help me find a husband? I'm coming to Jesus now. Can you help me raise perfect children? But what happens if the husband never comes? What happens if your children fall away from the faith? Does that mean that you are not a daughter of, but you are. Like, if you truly believe that you are his and that your identity is found in him, then you're allowed to rest in the unfinished work. Like, you might never be married. You might never have children, and you are complete in him.
So what is that? Oh my God. Like, I can't move past this because I'm just talking about like podcasts I've watched and conversations I've happened that's talked about how on a level like I've actually listened to podcasts and stuff that has faulted the church, particularly for Black women. Like, so we know that like a lot of women are getting married later in these day and age, but there's like higher statistics for, Black women being both the most educated segment of American society. And also they tend to get married or delay marriage later or not at all. And I've heard people lay the fault of that at the feet of the church and say it's the church's fault that because I wasn't exactly clear on like what, how I don't want to like misspeak. And so, but the picture that was painted was that, hey, because the church has done a poor job discipling women or loving women, or because of the standards, particularly in the Black church, like this was laid at the feet of the Black church, that the Black church has taken advantage of Black women or has not discipled them properly. Therefore, they're not marrying at X rate of people. And so I got those types of conversations in my mind. And I'm hearing that like juxtaposed to what you're saying, which is you're saying like, is Jesus enough? And so I don't even know if I'm asking it clearly, but how do those two things like intersect and intertwine? Like, is that clear?
I think
you think what I'm getting at?
I think it's clear. It's really interesting though, because if Black women make up most of the people that are serving and working in the Black church, and Black women are also being under-discipled, wouldn't that mean that Black women are not discipling the women that are in the church?
Lord Jesus.
I think, I don't think it's the church's fault. I would say I think the church overdevelops women and underdevelops men. So we have a mismatch a lot of times with men and women in the church, but I don't think that's why Black women ain't getting married.
Okay.
I think, I don't think that's why.
Okay. Why do you think this is happening?
I feel like you're trying to get me in trouble right now.
I'm just curious. Like, this is a genuinely, I'm genuinely fascinated. Like, this is like, because I like all of us, we're in the podcast spirit, right? And, we went to Walmart, got us some mics, and we did not go to Walmart. Let me not, Word is our producer. Shout out to Word. These are not Walmart. Like, this is the real deal. But anyway, like people get mics, they get some cameras, they set it up, and they start throwing stuff out there. And, it's a lot of voices that are saying a lot of things, like that are giving reasons, this is why Black women ain't getting married, and this is what the Black church ain't doing, and this is what Black folks need to do. And, it sounds good because they can edit a video well and, get some good clips and reels and stuff. But, it's real questions, but what I'm hearing you say is that in some ways and I'm kind of processing it in real time, is that oftentimes, even as we're trying to answer those questions, sometimes, and I learned this a long time, that the Bible and Scripture and Jesus reserves the right to actually not only reframe the answers to our questions, but the very questions that we're asking. Yeah. And what I'm hearing you say is that of course, I know you're not saying it is wrong to, desire a husband or wrong to desire motherhood, things like that, but that that can't be the crux of our identity. No. That's fascinating to me. I feel like that's a whole nother episode. So we're going to have you in season 3. So I'll write a note for that, But the other thing you talked about the identity piece, but then you also talked about how oftentimes in women's discipleship, sometimes it can lack rigor. Say more about that. What do you mean about that?
I have been to several. I'm not saying that they've been here refresh. I'm just saying all types of places. I've been to several women's Bible studies where we will read a passage and we'll say, how does that speak to you? What did you get from what you read? First of all, he wasn't talking to you. Like that, you're not the first audience for this scripture. Like we need to know contextually, like who is the author and who's that author speaking to? What was the original intent of that message to that group? And then from there we can try to pull some application. But I think that a lot of the discipleship for women it's basic stuff, learning how to study God's word. In depth, like truly learning how to study the Bible, learning the person of Jesus, learning how to follow after him and find your identity in him. These are the things that the church has been saying for 2,000 years.
No, I like that. It's like you're advocating for hermeneutics.
Right, for all.
Now you see why we got to write in curriculum, y'all. She's a scholar, y'all. Now she can croon too, but she's a Bible scholar. Now I also noticed, don't think I missed that little tag you put on there, for all. So I'm curious about that. Like, do you think that the church has, do you think there's been like women have not had the same opportunities in terms of having access to those things, or that maybe the church has maybe pushed it one direction more than the other, or like, what do you think has, like, why do you think there, like, that lightness is there? Do you think it's like, well, yeah, where do you think that comes from?
I think that in some ways the church has, I think we don't know what to do with women. I think that oftentimes we're looking for older women in the church to take up the younger women. And this is biblical. Like, I understand. However, we also have to look at what's happening contextually in these churches. The older women that we're wanting to teach the younger women, do they know the word? Have they studied? What is their identity shaped and built in? Because that's what they're going to disciple the other women in. And I think that a lot of times, some of the men that are capable of teaching and discipling are uncomfortable with discipling women.
Yeah.
And I know it can be uncomfortable, but when I look at the Bible, when we look at Mary sat at Jesus' feet, she didn't she was sitting at his feet. So we see precedent for women being disciples of men. And I think that, I oftentimes think we don't know what to do with women in the church. We're looking for older women to figure it out.
So, yeah, no, that's real. So you're saying, like, hey, there needs to be opportunities that are, like, actually carved out for women to learn the word, to grow, that are, isn't just, like, okay, let me give you a little tea time and so forth, so on, but that rigor, that depth, and making sure that they're able to access it as well, so that they can continue to grow and develop and go deeper as a student, as an apprentice of Jesus.
Yes.
Just because, that's what Jesus did,
Right.
Contrary to what a lot of people think, and y'all, like, there's a lot of people who talk about how Christianity has historically oppressed women and marginalized women. And I think Christianity in the wrong hands has done all kind of horrible things to a lot of people.
Anything in the wrong hands can cause harm.
Absolutely. But, historically, when you go through history, Christianity has actually liberated women, empowered women, and sought to, that's what Jesus did, like how he brought Mary close to his feet, and how that was outrageous in his day and time, by the way. Like, a rabbi would never, in fact, there were whole prayers about, I thank God I'm not a slave, I thank God I'm not a woman. And so that was a radical step, like, to have Mary at his feet, to have the first proclaimer of the resurrection be Mary Magdalene, who was the first visitor to the borrowed tomb there. And so, no, I hear you. So we've talked a lot about, like, you talked about first in terms of identity, women and identity, and then you talked about the need for rigorous study. I kind of want to shift gears a little bit and talk about, basically those things are hovering around spiritual health. I want to talk a bit about emotional health. And here's a question that I have for you. As you've discipled women and have been discipled yourself, how do you walk with women and sisters through pain, trauma, and seasons of doubt in their faith? So, I mean, you can go wherever you want to go. You can talk about your experiences, the experience of others, however you want to get at it. But how have you dealt with sisters or been dealt with yourself, when dealing with the trauma and the pain and all the things that can often be the reality of so many of our sisters?
Yeah. I think what I typically try to share my story through that process, because pain, trauma, and doubt are all things that I've experienced as I walk with Christ. Mm-hmm. I think the first part of it is validating the pain and giving people like a space to say that they're hurting and just listen to them and just be present in that. I'm not going to run to the Bible and try to find an answer or an explanation for your pain or your suffering. I'm just going to sit with the person in what they're going through. And then once they realize, wait a minute, I'm not in this by myself, then I think we have more space to ask deeper questions. Because pain and trauma and doubt, it's almost like a bad prescription. So you're trying to see the world, you're trying to see God, you're trying to see your faith community, but it's like your glasses, these aren't your glasses. So you can't see anything clearly. I think from after we kind of sit in that, trying to, what is it called? Pain, trauma, and doubt reshape a person's worldview. So if we can do the work of calling that stuff out, then we can do the work of adjusting their worldview. And then from there, I like to ask the question, like, what did your experience tell you about God? And just let them talk. Because then you'll kind of find that this pain often points, pain unhealed whispers lies about God. He doesn't love me. He doesn't care. He's not here. And I think from there, then we can get into like reshaping and reforming and actually discipling somebody in who God actually is. But it takes a lot of time. And I think a lot of people don't have the patience to sit with people in pain, in doubt, in trauma. We just want them to be well because we're uncomfortable with it.
No, that's powerful. I think what you said about, because as you were talking about it and just listening to you talking about, like, walking with walking with a person who's been through pain and trauma and, wrestling with their faith and stuff, those aren't things that we can microwave and make go away. And we all need the space and the time to sit with a person and to have the capacity ourselves. And, as I thought about it, there's this quote I heard. I still don't remember where I got it from. I need to Google it. I'm sure somebody of note said it. But I've heard that the greatest gift that you can give a person is the gift of unhurried time. But few of us have unhurried time to give. Most of us are overprogrammed. Most of us are, we got kids, we got spouses, we got jobs, we got bills. And so, it's like the thing where you say, hey, how you doing? And the person really tells you, like, I actually did not have time to.
I didn't want you to tell me that.
Yeah, I really didn't want to know. I was saying hi, actually, So I'm curious, how do we, when we start talking about discipleship or apprenticing or being students of Jesus, the curriculum, that we used at the church that we walk through, Practicing the Way, John Mark Comer, he talks a lot about how the way of Jesus and being an apprentice of Jesus means slowing down time to make space to be conformed to the image of Jesus, to be transformed. And so I'm just curious, real practically, in your life, because you are a wife, you are a mother, you are working, you are writing curriculum, you are leading worship, you're a leader in our church, you're doing all these things, and you're a sister, you're a friend, and at the end of the day, you're a daughter of the Most High. What does it look like practically? Like, how do you make space to do exactly what you talked about, walking with a person who may be experiencing pain, trauma, and need to experience the grace of God? How do you make space for that and make space to experience discipleship yourself?
I steward my nose very, very well.
The nose.
Yes. It's my favorite word. No, I can't do it. I can't be there. No, I can't. Like, I love it. I didn't before, but I do now because when I steward my nose well, it makes my yes so much more potent. Yeah. But if I'm saying yes to everything, I have nothing to give anybody. So yeah, I think that's the first thing. I have to live with margin. A lot of it.
Yeah. So margin. So what do you say to that person that's like, Bernie, I ain't got time. That might be all right for you, but
They have time.
I ain't got time. I got to work. I got these kids. I got to hustle. I got to grind. I got to da da da. What do you say to the person that says, I can't do that. Like I ain't got time.
If I was speaking candidly, I would say, you have time. You're lying. You have time. We all have time. If we all sat down with a spreadsheet and wrote down 15-minute increments of how we spent our days, we would realize you have the time. You're wasting it somewhere. We waste a lot of time doing things we don't need to do. And then I would also challenge the person, write down every time you say yes to something. And look at how often you say yes to something. There's some times where you say yes where you shouldn't have. If the Lord, in Matthew 28, he calls us to make disciples. The Lord is not going to call you to do something and then not give you the time to do it. Maybe it means you have to live with less. Maybe it means you have to say no to some things, but you have time.
So I'm curious. I'm real curious. I want to talk about like voices today. Some of the voices that are, there's so many voices today. Like we've kind of already hit on it a little bit, like talking about all the podcast sphere and, it's just everybody talking, a lot of talking, social media, traditional media, all the media. People are talking about womanhood, what women should believe. So I was wondering, can you speak to some of the voices and some of the narratives that's shaping the way women think about womanhood today? And how would you critique some of those voices and narratives?
Well, I'll say I have been off of social media for a little while.
Really?
Yeah, it's been very good for my mental health. Listen, when I say getting away from social media did my heart and my mind so much good. One of the things that I hear a lot of women like in my circles talk about is like the soft life. Like,
the soft life.
I want the soft life, and it's just, I'm like, oh, this is very unhealthy. As far as voices that are like dominating in culture as it relates to women, I don't know. Like I don't know who the girlies are listening to. I have no idea. I know in like the church space, you got like Dr. Sarita Lyons. I like her a lot. Or Priscilla Shire, some Christian women, but I think a lot of women, because I'm not trying to beat up on my sisters. I think a lot of women, because they are seeking marriage, they oftentimes get their cues for what it means to be a woman from very, very broken men. But
okay, can you say more about these very broken? I'm not one of them. Am I?
No. There was this podcast that was circulating. I can't think of who the guy is, but he has like all of these singles giving like, because most of the viewers are women, giving mostly women relationship advice. I'm like, ain't none of these jokers in a successful relationship. Why are you taking advice from them? But yeah, I'll be honest and say I don't really know who the dominating voices are.
That's not a bad thing to say.
Yeah, and maybe that's a sign. Like maybe we should not be on YouTube as much, listening to everybody. That might be helpful. Maybe being in actual community with people where you can like trace the line of like success and submission in their life. Maybe you should listen to people you actually know and see.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that. You've said this word many times, several times. Community. Tell me, say more about that. Like, how has community shaped you as a woman? Like that may be, in community with your sisters, it may be in, co-ed community. Like how has community impacted your walk as a woman who's a disciple of Jesus?
Yeah, honestly, community saved my life. It was triage. Like I think of during the pandemic, I was in such a crazy season of doubt. I was just like done. I was so cynical and just done with the faith. And it was actually in community that someone was able to see that I was drowning. I didn't know I was drowning. And they were able to call that out and say, hey, I think that you are drifting. And I would like to pull you closer so that we don't lose you in like this weird dark space. And literally during the pandemic, every Saturday, Pastor Kyle would get on a Zoom with me for 3 hours.
3 hours.
3 hours.
That's a long Zoom meeting. That mean he didn't have a free account.
What,
he was paying
right.
for that.
Right. But over the pandemic, I think it was free too, though.
Oh, was it? Okay.
So maybe
all right. So he wasn't paying for it.
He wasn't
okay.
paying for it.
All right.
But yeah, and he said, listen, it could just be me and you on the Zoom. If you want to pull some sisters along, you can do that. Like, but let's get together and let's start talking so that you're not in the dark as you wrestle through this. And I brought 2 sisters along with me, and like I said, 3 hours. That was my community.
Yeah.
We did that for a year.
A year. So 3 hours.
And I was a believer.
And you was a believer.
Going through extreme doubt.
So wait a minute. So you're suggesting to me that it's possible to simultaneously be a believer and go through extreme doubt.
Yes.
Can you say more? Because I think sometimes we put those things like, if you really believe, then you won't doubt. And if you are a doubter or a skeptic, you can't believe. I think
I don't want to say my favorite disciple, but Thomas was doubting.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah. Oh,
Thomas was like, show me, prove to me.
Yeah.
And Jesus did. If Jesus can respond that way, the church should too. But yeah, I'd gotten to a place where I did not realize that the things that I had built my faith on were superficial. And I didn't know that until life hit. Okay. So I had a miscarriage, and I was like, oh, Lord, you're not here. Like this, none of this is real. And instead of me saying that out loud in community, I started to become really cynical and just slowly drift away. So yeah, I knew he was there because I was mad at somebody. You know, I wasn't mad at nothing. I was talking to him, and I was saying, "Is this real?" And really, the question that I was asking underneath was, "Are you actually good?" And I had to come to grips with, even when life is hard, he's still good. Even when I'm going through pain, trauma, devastating loss, he's still good. But that experience and that learning happened in community for me. I couldn't do that by myself.
That's incredible. I find it amazing that you said, just what you said at the beginning, like I was drifting and I didn't even know I was drifting.
Oh yeah.
And it was actually diagnosed in community. Like,
yes.
And man, I just wonder, I even think about myself. I'm thinking about my own life. Like, I'm confident there were times when like I was drifting, and I'm just wondering, if I had been in community, like sooner would it have been caught? I think about, like some folks, earlier in my faith, man, I backslid a couple times, but I'm like, wow, maybe. But when I think about those times, like I wasn't like super deep in community, so it was like I'm like, would I have not kind of went and wild out for a little bit?
Yeah.
Because maybe I was drifting longer than I realized, but somebody else could be like, hey, bro, you done moved, and I just think it's fascinating that you said that it was triaged and diagnosed in community, and that was the lifeline that helped you to even as you believed and doubted at the same time. I just think that's powerful. And I think as the church, we have to continue to make space for people to ask questions and to wrestle and not just, come through real quick with Romans 8:28, all things work together, and let people sit with doubt and still like, hey, you can simultaneously, like you talk about Thomas, literally, I don't know if you're aware of this, in the Catholic Church, he's the patron saint of skeptics. Because on a level, I think it's fascinating in Matthew 28, we all go into all the world and preach the gospel, blah, blah, blah. That's Matthew 28, 18, 19. Verse 17 says that he appeared to them and some doubted. Yeah. Like, this is the resurrection. Jesus is standing in front of you in the body and some are still doubting. Yeah. And yet they still get the Great Commission. Yeah. Unbelievable, And so, yeah, I think it's important, and I'm grateful. Man, shout out to Pastor Kyle. I just did an episode with Pastor Kyle on manhood. So shout out to Pastor Kyle for walking with you and walking with, that group of sisters, and for y'all continuing to be able to have that wrestle and to create space for that. Yeah. I am curious about that. in terms of like walking through the doubt, the questioning, the wrestle, even as you maintain faith, was there like a moment, I'm curious, was there like a moment when you were like, okay, now I believe, like, we talked about Thomas, like, he put his finger in his hand and it's like, okay, my Lord and my God, now I believe. Was it like that for you? Was it like a moment, or was it more like I graduated, almost kind of like how I drifted? I was kind of drifting and ended up in a place. Did you kind of drift back? Like, was it a moment or was it over time? Like,
I think that for me, because I don't want to make a generalization for all people, but I think for me, my doubt revealed that my belief was a weak muscle. And because I hadn't learned how to wrestle with God, anytime a wrestle came up, I saw it as a moment to leave. So I realized what Pastor Kyle taught me was, how do you wrestle with God? Because if you learn how to wrestle with God, you're not prone to leaving. You learn how to fight well.
Yeah.
So that's what I learned how to do. For me, it wasn't it was developing a muscle. So doubt still comes. Doubt still happens. But because I know how to wrestle with the Lord, I don't have to leave my faith to wrestle.
Y'all, let me tell you something. I would give you her handle to follow her on Instagram, but she's off social media. But listen, this is fire, Bernie. What you're saying and what you're sharing about the ability to continue to wrestle, because you're right. Like, I'm a whole pastor, and I tell people all the time, I spend a lot of time in hospitals with sick people that I love, actually. People think that like being a pastor, like it's a job. Like I'm showing up in a hospital visiting these people and it's like, like I'm clocking in or something. It's like, no, I actually know these people. I do life with these people. These people have shared relationship with me, and I'm sitting in a hospital watching them with cancer. And I got to preach Sunday. And I'm not feeling Jesus right now because it's like, this is, and it seems like it's always the people who love him the most sometimes. You this person tithe, because I'm a pastor. I know they tithe, they love Jesus, they discipling their kids and grandkids. Why they get cancer? Why they sick? Why this going on? And so I love what you said about like the doubt. It isn't like one day you cured out. Like I got inoculated against gout, not gout, doubt. Gout will come too. You enough red meat. But like, I get inoculated against doubt. Like, no, like we have these ebbs and flows, but I love what you said about what you learned with Pastor Kyle, which is how to wrestle well. And, obviously the picture of, for those of us who are in the church, the picture of Jacob wrestling with God and, literally that being the name, like he that wrestles with God, Israel, and so, I love it. So as we get ready to wrap up, I'm real curious about something. Like, as I've stated earlier in this podcast, I am a man. And I'm curious, what advice, if you just had to talk to your brothers for a minute, like now, so you didn't throw us out there. You say, look, the brothers, brother pastors, we need to make sure we're creating space. We need to be discipling, pointing to our sisters, all these things. What advice, because you didn't talk to the sisters too. You've pulled no punches. Like you've been out here. What would you say to your brothers about walking with, in relationship, in community, in discipleship relationship? Like, what would you say just to brothers about how we can better walk with and even disciple and just do life with Christian women?
Oh, man. I feel like I'm getting in trouble again. The thing that comes to mind at the top is do the necessary work of sexual integrity so that you don't always see your sister as a stumbling block.
I mean, she didn't even, I didn't say nothing. I didn't even know that's what we was doing. I thought she was going to say, join a small group where there's men and women in it. I was not fully, I'm not even saying you're wrong.
Okay.
Please say more.
I think that oftentimes men keep women at bay because of their internal struggles. And the truth is, like, one of the most beautiful discipling relationships that I have at Refresh right now is actually like the connection that I have with Mark. Like,
which Mark?
I'm sorry, because there's a lot of them. Mark Goins.
Mark Goins. Okay.
Yes,
Director of worship.
Yes, director of worship. Over the summer, we were meeting once a week for hours with him, not just teaching me music and worship leading, but also checking into my life. Mm-hmm. How are you doing? How are you as a mother? How are you as a wife? How are you as a sister? How are you as a daughter? Mm-hmm. I think that if we find that brothers are capable of seeing their sisters truly as sisters, discipling women will not be difficult.
Mm-hmm. So you said brothers need to work on their sexual integrity. It's kind of like what Jesus said when he said that, if a man has an issue, lusting after a woman, like pluck out your eye, deal with yourself. Yeah. Not like, give her instructions, deal with yourself.
Yeah.
So I want to dig into that because can I just keep it a buck for a minute?
Yes.
I'm a whole man, as I've said 9 times, and I'm a pastor. I have to shepherd and pastor women, but I'm just keep it real. Like a lot of it ain't that like I don't be wanting to pour into sisters, but the whole Me Too, like all you need, I'm very keenly aware that I don't need anything to be true.
Yes.
I just need an accusation.
True.
I just need something to look weird.
Yeah.
And my ministry is done. And I live in the grip of that a lot, actually. Like it actually informs the way I move with my calendar and things like that. So what would you say to me about like, hey, I don't, there are women that I trust and that I spend time with and things like this, but that's a really that's a small list because a lot of men are like, sometimes, it isn't like, I'm not worried about like I'm not a creeper. I'm not worried about my sexual integrity. Like that's not what I'm on. I'm more nervous about, I don't want no allegations or something to be taken a weird way. And all of a sudden now something is painted in a way that will end my ministry. And that's real. Yeah. Like, so I guess my question is like, how do we deal with that reality? Because some guys are like, well, I'm just trying to, I'm keeping sisters at bay, or I'm not walking in close relationship, not because I'm worried about my sexual integrity. I actually don't want no weird allegations and I just don't want the trouble. So I'm gonna just steer clear. How would you speak into that?
Yeah. Well, one, just like, I hate that we've come to a place where like men have to be afraid to be in community with sisters because of that. And there have been too many times where men have been lied on in that way. And at the same time, I would say relationship is risky in all places. Nowadays, it could be the brother that's batting his eyes at you, that you're discipling. So I'm just being honest. So
hey,
it's risky.
It's a risky either way.
It's risky either way.
Hey, I need to check my discipleship group. Okay,
but I also think discipling in community is a very I would say a soft launch into that for a man that's maybe nervous about that. What would it look like for a leader to disciple a co-ed group and get them together all the time and create that space where it becomes a norm in church culture to have women sitting at the feet of their elders or their, their pastors. Yeah. And I also say using discernment. And asking, if a sister is approaching and desiring discipleship, I would ask those necessary questions. Like, I'll speak for myself. I had to do work in therapy to deal with my father issues because, and I've talked to you about this. I was putting these unhealthy expectations on you as my pastor to fulfill this role that my dad should have completed. I think it's very necessary that women do the work of understanding that as they seek out discipleship, especially if it's going to be from a man.
Okay. So I hear what you're saying about like women, like being discipled and, not being kept at arm's length and things like that. How does that interact? Scripture talked about in Titus, which you brought up about how, women are disciple women, men disciple, like the older women discipling the younger women. what does that look like? Like, is it what has like, because you made the statement that women have often been under discipled, right? Like with the tea times and this and other. How does that affect the ability of older women to disciple younger women? And I'll add it to that, not only in terms of like content, but even in our culture. Is our culture even set up so that younger women are even receptive to the discipleship of older women?
I think that in a lot of ways, younger women can have more humility so that they're receptive to what older women have to give. I think of an encounter that you and I had when I first came to Refresh. No, it was the Journey. And you very kindly challenged me to go to seminary so that I could teach. And even though I'm not done. I'm gonna go.
That's
I'm
right.
gonna finish my degree now.
You got it.
But I think about how so much of what I learned there because in that moment, that was a discipleship moment from you to me. And what I learned in seminary, I now use as I teach the women on the worship team, as I walk with them through things in life. So in that moment, the discipleship that you offered me, and that I think we talked for like almost 3 hours. In that moment of discipleship from you to me, I was able then to transfer that to the women of the worship team. So I think that women of all ages have to be committed to learning and pursuing discipleship so that we can instruct other women. That takes time. That takes a lot of work. That takes a lot of humility. But I think it's possible.
Bernie, thank you so much for coming on to dig in with Dr. Los, digging into discipleship. As we wrap up this wide-ranging conversation about discipleship and implications on this for women, for men, across the spectrum, what would you say as you think about the importance and the critical nature of discipleship in our life, in the church, in the world today? What is your hope for those who would hear this? What would you hope and what would your prayer be for those who will tune in and listen to this conversation?
My hope and my prayer is that we realize that discipleship is not an option. It is a mandate. The Lord does not call us to go and gather people that will sit in the pews. He calls us to make disciples.
All right. So your hope is that people will get to work.
Yes.
Y'all, listen, thank you for tuning in for Digging with Dr. Los as we are digging into discipleship in season 2. I've had on this episode my dear sister, the worship leader, the discipler, the writer, the author, the theologian, the encourager, the sister, the mother, the wife, Bernie Jamison. I'm so glad, Bernie, that you hung out with me today, that you blessed us, because you already told us that your no, you be saying no to stuff. So your yes meant a lot for today. So thank you for giving us that yes. Thank you for pouring into us today. And thank you for challenging us. I think we all, men, women, children, we all caught a few strays today. And so thank you for challenging us and encouraging us to pursue and live life of discipleship. Thank you so much, my sister.